Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Sanyin Podcast. Today I'm happy, I'm overjoyed to be in the presence of Miss Runako Celina. Miss Runako, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, JP.
Um, First things first, I shall ask my guests. For someone who may not know you, how would you introduce yourself?
Okay, well, hi, my name is Runako Celina. I'm an investigative journalist, producer, documentary filmmaker, and also I co-founded the platform Blacklivity China, which was designed to document the experiences of people of African descent in China and in relation to China.
Okay, let's talk about Blacklivity China. I think I checked your podcast, so the episodes are not so many. You won an award for the work you're doing at Blacklivity China. I've seen your social media. So tell me about Blacklivity China. What inspired you to start it? What's the story behind it?
Yeah, well, I was based in Beijing for about 7 years. And during that time, I mean, I was part of a massive African diaspora, as you are now. And it was perhaps the most exciting time to be part of this community. Everyone had ideas, everyone was building something, everyone had opinions on the nature of the African continent's relationship with China. But oftentimes in media, more widely in mainstream media, you'd hear perspectives from outside of the community. And by that, I don't just mean others who weren't of African descent, but also people who weren't based in China or had any experience of engaging with China. And in 2018, there was a massive catalyst. So there was an advert that came out. Oh, no, this was actually not the advert, that was before. But this was the Spring Festival Gala on CCTV that
Mm-hmm.
came out that depicted Africans in a way that many in the community weren't happy with. Myself and my co-founder, we started to see lots of commentary about this incident online, but they were again coming from the outside. So we got up and think this was over the Spring Festival period, and we wrote this article, published it, closed our laptops, and didn't think anything of it. And then we saw that in the morning it had gone viral. So many people were relating to it. I mean, we published it on WeChat and the like, and everyone was speaking about it. And that was kind of a start of a journey for us as a platform to really think about, okay, this is a service to our community. This is a way to capture our voices and our perspectives in a way that, like, oftentimes we think about history as something that is hundreds of years ago, but actually our experiences on the ground there were historic. And so we started to really gather opinions, and it started actually as a website. So our website is actually closed now. It will still stay online forever, no matter the future of the platform. But it started off as a website, and then it started off and then it went to a WeChat subscription. You adding how the little subscription pages, and then it went on to Instagram and Twitter, and we collected like over 20,000 followers across all of these platforms. Yeah, to really just get our voices out there. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
Nice, nice, nice. So is it still active? Is the community still active?
So I took the decision when I moved back to the UK, where I am now, to take a pause on BLC. The main reason was because it started from a place of passion. It started from a place of on the ground experience, and not being there anymore made me think I need to reshape what this could look like and restructure it and how I could commit to it. So it's been in that position since then, essentially. And now I'm kind of reformulating into a more mature vision, let's say. I think of life in like life stages. So I was still a student at the time that I started this platform, and my experience at Peking University, where I was at the time, that obviously informed the way that I approached media and the way that I approached creating news and telling my community stories. But now I'm a journalist and I have experience, a different type of experience to bring to the table. So I'm thinking of what does this new stage look like. So there'll be announcements pretty soon on that front. Yeah.
Nice, nice. We're waiting for it, waiting for it. And so let's go to the BBC documentary, Racism for Sale. I remember when I watched it, I was very sad. It's one of those Africa Eye documentaries that I watched that really triggered an emotion in me. And whenever I I have friends from Malawi who I talk to. I usually bring that conversation, and they feel annoyed that the guy was set free. But that documentary, did you think it would have that global? How do I say? Like everyone talking about it when you're making it?
The short answer is no. I mean, you know, we and you for yourself as well. I mean, you do this out of passion.
Yeah.
You do this because you think this is something important that needs to be highlighted, that needs to be shown, brought to light, you know. And that was my intention. What some people don't realize is that on Blacklivity China, I had been creating videos about this whole industry for some time. I think my first might have been in around 2018, 2019, and nothing was happening, nothing was being done, nothing was being changed. There were lots of public figures as well. Wodamaya was one of them. He had been making videos about this industry as well, and I felt frustrated that for years now I could still see evidence of this industry thriving and of the content creators behind these videos continuing to succeed. So maybe I should give some background into the documentary for anyone who hasn't seen it. Racism for Sale focuses on, well, it exposes a content creator in an industry of exploitation that started in China, which revolves around young Africans. Oftentimes, sometimes it's men, sometimes it's women, but in this instance, it was young African children being kind of put together in front of a camera and made to say statements in Chinese for profit. So on the Chinese internet at the time, you could buy videos of young African children, some that you didn't know, saying whatever you paid them to say. So it could be good luck in your exams. It could be happy birthday. It could be will you marry me? Or it could be something more sadistic. And in our investigation, we focus on one particular video that surfaced on the Chinese internet around 2019, in which the children are made to say, 我是黑鬼, 智商低, I'm a black devil, or the N word, essentially. My IQ is low. So we use that video to explore the evilest side of this industry, which is, in my opinion, in itself, exploitative, and find out who's behind it. And the man that we ended up finding and that I confronted in the investigation was the most popular content creator on this side of the industry, filming with children. So yeah, that's why I did it. I did it because I'd been seeing this for a long time. I, as many Africans and people of African descent, felt pained seeing these videos being made, not knowing what was happening to the children behind the scenes. And I wanted something to be done. And the impact that it had really spoke to how many of us also felt the same. Even people who didn't have anything to do with living in China, never experienced some of these attitudes themselves. Globally, people felt the same, and that was quite that was quite a great feeling.
Do you think it has achieved its goal of highlighting the evils of that industry?
Yes and no. Yes, we've got this content creator, and I know you mentioned that many people were like, oh, why did we have to let him go? This was also something for me that was quite challenging, right? We, as journalists, my job is to bring something to light. My job is to say this is happening, and then those in law enforcement and those in positions like the police, for example, they have to act if they think that the evidence threshold for them has been met to make arrests and the like. And it's so frustrating because sometimes you wish you could take those things into your own hands, but you can't. And so my hope after the documentary came out was to see what would happen next and leave that in the hands of the very capable Malawian government. And so what we saw after the documentary was released was that this man tried to flee to neighboring Zambia. He was then apprehended in Zambia and extradited back to Malawi. He was arrested eventually, and then he was charged. He served a year inside, and he was made to pay money back to the families and everyone else. We made the point in the documentary that this is only one person, right? This is part of a massive industry. So when I say yes, I mean that, yes, one person has been kind of, stopped. One aspect of this industry has been stopped. Children no longer feature in these videos, which to me is, I mean, children are precious, right? That should never have been a thing. So that's something that makes me very happy. On the flip side of it, when I say no, there are still elements of this industry that exist and that I consider to be problematic. So, for example, you have videos with men and women being featured doing these same kind of dances and saying these quotes and
Mm,
everything.
yeah, yeah.
And just because someone is an adult doesn't mean they're not being exploited. And so that makes me feel a bit pained. That makes me feel a bit annoyed that that side of things is still happening. But I am glad for the change in Malawi. I'm glad for the change in the appearance of children not being there anymore. Um, yeah, yeah, and I'm glad for the example that it.
A content creator like me posts something on WeChat on others, there's usually racist remarks, that comments that come, which is very disturbing. And in your way, how do you think we can address it?
Yeah, this is. I mean, I'm gonna ask this question to you as well because I'd love this
Yeah,
to be a dialogue afterwards. But yeah, that's something that I cannot get my head around. The fact that all these years later, this is still happening. You know, when I was still there, that was the same thing that would happen. People would leave gorilla emojis, like they would comment just hideous things, even on videos that showed like interracial couples or like half
yeah,
Chinese, half
yeah,
African child. Hideous comments. And my question is on on a space on the internet, right? The Chinese internet is
yeah,
heavily censored. When
yeah,
you type certain things, you will get nothing show up, right? Is there a decision that is being made not to censor racism on these platforms? Because surely, if you can censor other things, why can you not censor anti-blackness? Why can you not censor bullying? Essentially, it's essentially bullying of people on the internet, and I think this is still an issue that needs to be addressed online. You know, what I loved about my time in China was that, I mean, a huge part of it was being part of this massive diaspora, and everyone that I met there, most of us don't have intentions of staying in China forever. We are there to study, we are there to learn, we're there to work, and then take the resources and the skills back to our countries of origin. So we're essentially visitors. And how, I mean, Africans are some of the most hospitable people in the world. How do you treat a visitor when they're in your home, right? You make sure that they're taken care of and they're well treated and well respected. And I think that we're not asking for anything more than that. We're just asking for basic, basic things, humanity. So it's a problem and it needs to be addressed, in my opinion. What about you? What's your experience been on that?
No, because my podcast is bringing up people who are highlighting African stories. Most comments that I receive, especially on my WeChat channel, are very. First, some are surprised that African is an African doing this and this. Others are like, "Go back to your country." Monkey emojis, you
Oh,
black
oh,
man, you what, go back to Africa. You know, it has that thing of, have had more comments of go back to Africa than I would say positive comments from them.
wow.
So I don't know, but I think most of us have just said this as a thick skin, and
Mm,
we move forward because every content creator that I've had on my show and I met experiences it. Definitely. Once you post on Douyin um, and WeChat, just expect it. And it's worse for even the interracial couples. It's really worse for them. At
yeah,
least as
yeah.
it's worse. They even say the remarks to their babies and their
Oh,
children, which is very hurtful. So
yeah.
it's kind of
I think,
yeah.
do you think there's a solution beyond just having thick skin? Because I'm like, why? Yeah, what do you think there's a solution beyond that or not?
I think with China, everything comes from the government. So
Mm,
just pray that they listen to the message. Without
mm,
it, nothing will work.
yeah,
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 it's
that's
that
true.
crazy. Okay, my next question would be so you've been in China for quite a long time. Um,
Mm.
you're from Africa. How, in your way, would you describe the China-Africa relationship?
That's a massive question, right? I probably would start by reframing it to the Africa-China relationship.
Okay.
I think oftentimes, right, we lead with China And that creates a power dynamic that, as Africans, we probably, and people of African descent, we probably shouldn't be invested in. We want one that is in partnership, that
Yeah.
isn't led by one versus the other. Or if anything, as Africans, our interest should be in it being a relationship that's led by us and on our terms. So I think it's that. I think the second thing to say is that, and even from like the media perspective, right? I think it's important that we understand the relationship as a nuanced one and not even just one relationship. Because sometimes a single Chinese person will do something in the African continent and we label it as China.
Yeah.
And that's why even in the film, right, it was really important because we get frustrated with that happening with us when we're in China. If someone who happens to be Black or happens to be African descent does something, then it's a whole thing that represents everyone. And
Yeah.
it's like, no. But even with the investigation, it was important to make that distinction. So it's to recognize the differences. Is this are we talking about the element of the relationship that is Chinese government policy towards African countries, or are we speaking about Chinese migration into African countries and the behavior of Chinese citizens in specific African countries? We have to break it down into layers in many senses. Um, yeah, because I think that's the easiest way. Otherwise, sometimes we fall into like blanket statements, right? Yeah, so I would reframe it as I said, and I would treat it as a layered relationship with positives and negatives and everything in between.
Okay. Okay. Nice. Nice. And when I looked at your bio and your website and your work, I saw that you like genealogy. Why? What's your fascination with it?
Yeah, so I guess I left Beijing because of the pandemic,
Mm.
and I haven't been back since. And during that time, I started to kind of just explore my interests and explore beyond just Africa China relations and what I wanted to do in media spaces. And actually, a bit of my background. So, my family is Grenadian, which is an island in the Caribbean, Jamaican, and Gambian. So, for me, trying to piece together, because a lot of our how would I put this, a lot of our focus as a platform when I started BLC was, yes, on documenting our experiences, but also documenting like the way in which, when you're in China, right, you might be, where are you from, for example, what's your country of origin?
Uganda. I'm from Uganda.
You're Ugandan, but you may find that a West African feels like kin to you because you're in
Yeah.
an environment where you're so foreign, and you start to realize you have more in common with people from similar background but the other side of the continent than and that made me start to think about genealogy, because it made me think about ways to tell stories that shows our similarities instead of our differences. So for example, when I look at my Caribbean family, if we go back and we trace our roots far enough back, we start to find out which part of the African continent we come from. We start to find out the origins of lots of our traditions in the Caribbean. We start to find out those things. And I think genealogy is just an exciting way for me to build those bridges. All of
Mm.
my work, there's that theme, is about building bridges. BLC was the same, Blacklivity China was the same, and now what I'm doing in my free time outside of my work is something that does the same. So that's why I love genealogy. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. Nice. And as a journalist, I would just want to ask you this question. How do you think, like, we, as people who are interested in media in Africa and our
Mm,
stories, can help reshape the African narrative? Because recently I was part of a survey where they say that 72% of the stories from major international corporations have African. They mainly portray African issues, war, famine, you know,
mm,
than the positive things that are coming from the continent. And it shows that makes us lose investment of about 6.2 billion US dollars annually as a continent.
wow.
So we who are coming up as journalists, how can we try to change that?
I mean, firstly, that survey, you will definitely have to share that with me afterwards. I'd
Yeah.
love to see that.
Yeah.
Um, I think obviously the first thing is doing what you're doing. I mean, change starts with us, right? So we all have positive stories that we can tell, and trying to use our own platforms to do that is the biggest first step that I think we can take. Doing that collectively as well. Sometimes I think we can be quite individualistic in approach. So if you find a collective or organization that is already um, striving towards your same goals, partner with them, contact them, see how you can join, see how you can support. Not everyone is going to want to work in the media, right? But maybe you can fundraise on behalf of an African media organization that is doing that work. So I think that is definitely the first step, is to be the change that you want to see. The second thing, and I hope it's not controversial or too far away from your question, one of the things that I think we are working on as a people is to deal with our issues in house before we try and deal with everyone else. So by that I mean, we know that, and just like any family, right? Community is just like a family. There's always going to be issues in house. Maybe this person doesn't like that person, or this ethnic group doesn't like that ethnic group, right? And sometimes I think we give too much attention, in a sense, because I do know the economic side of things, right, to what the outside is doing, to what mainstream media is doing. And I think if we were to get our own house in order first, by that I mean really focusing on getting rid of all of the little bits of discrimination or um, conflicts that we have amongst each other, that might be a good place to start before even trying to then confront the issue, that the perspectives that the others on the outside bring, you know? So, like, for example, I remember when I was in Beijing, sometimes I would hear East Africans have some things to say about West Africans, and some people from, and vice versa, right? I'm just giving examples of the things that
Yeah,
happen. You know how it gets.
yeah,
And the same thing with people directly from the African continent, and some Caribbean people as well. Some Caribbean people would have things to say, and I'm like, well, we need to. And then there's the whole, right, okay, there's some racism from Chinese people too. But I'm like, let's get our house in order. Let's deal with our infighting first, and then let's conquer the rest. Do you kind of see my point here?
yeah. I
Um,
get it.
yeah, so I'm not saying that we can't do both at the same time. Like, yes, let's continue to shine positive lights and be the change that we want to see. Um, but let's also kind of look inwards and be the change internally as well. I think the last thing I would say on this is, like, times are changing really with the media. Um, our global trust of traditional media is lower than it ever has been.
Yeah, yeah.
And people are turning to social media and individuals that they trust instead of platforms that they trust for their news. And that means that it's a really great time for us as Africans and people of African descent to raise our own stories to the fore, and to kind of vote with our eyes, in a sense, right? So all media functions off of eyes and ears and interest. If you're not giving any interest to that negative article about Africans or about the continent or about us as a whole, it's going to fail. So I think we just redirect our eyes from that content and almost act as if it doesn't exist, because the tide is turning. And if we focus on the things that we do want to see more, pretty soon those platforms won't be able to exist or function anymore. We're in such a great position as a continent, the youngest continent in the world. Like, we're in such a great position. And I know that's not, I don't want to be just like blindly positive. There's lots of issues as well, but yeah, we have lots of benefits too.
Nice. Indeed. Indeed. My last question to you would be, what what advice would you give the youth listening in, and what makes you a proud African?
Okay, advice. That was the first thing, right?
Yeah.
That's a big question. Like, in what area, in what
Anything. It could be in terms of your career, in terms of journalism, or just as experience as and being in the diaspora facing discrimination and challenges.
Okay. I think, hmm, honestly, like self-belief. I think self-belief is probably one thing that I would say. And community. So like, believe in yourself and do whatever you need to block out the outside noise of people who have negatives to say, and that includes the experience of racism.
Mm.
Yes, that needs to be resolved, but in the meantime, acting like it doesn't exist is a really great way to kind of just keep your eye on the prize and remember what you are and believe in yourself. And then for those times when you're struggling to, community. Build community around you that will pour into you as you pour into them, that will uplift you and remind you of who you are and have your little North Star in mind of what you're aiming for. And I mean, for me at the time, like when I was in Beijing, that was absolutely the diaspora. I would look left, I would look right, I would see people who look like me doing amazing things, and I'd be like, yeah, this is possible. So that's what I'd say: self-belief and build your community. Yeah.
Okay, okay. And what makes you a proud African? To conclude.
Our resilience. I hate this kind of idea that we have to be strong all the time, but my gosh, we have been through some things as a collective, as a people, and
Yeah.
we are still the baddest there is. Like, we're still incredible. So I would say that. I would absolutely say that. Yeah. Resilience.
Okay, thank you, Miss Runako Celina, for passing by. We
Thank
truly
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you for your time and keep up the good work.
Yay.